So it's well known that health and social care sectors definitely are struggling to attract and retain talent. With, of course, the well publicised news, for example, with the NHS, that the times are tough, budgets are tight, and with the new government coming in, first Labour government for 14 years, and it's really important to look about, how the next generation of talent can support Keir Starmer's generation of national renewal. So what we're doing is we are going to be talking about Gen Z and what they can do to help contribute to the government's decade of national renewal. So I'm delighted to have Conor Cotton on the podcast with me. How you doing, Conor?
Yeah, really well. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks. Thanks for joining. You and your organisation, we know each other for a long time actually, and
Yeah.
I know you know a lot about Gen Z. So I think let's start off with a bit of an intro for those people not so much in the know about Conor Cotton and Not Going to Uni.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Conor. I'm the managing director here at Not Going to Uni and Walking Talking Not Going to Uni. So had all of my university offers throughout sixth form and made the decision not to go, and really led me actually to go into Not Going to Uni for my first job, which happens to be as a sales exec at NGTU, and worked my way up through the sales ranks, went to another organisation and came back to become the managing director a couple of years ago now, and help continue to grow that business into what it is today. So historically speaking, Not Going to Uni has been the leading job board for young people at post-16 and post-18 in schools and colleges to find alternatives to university or to college or to sixth form. So that will be through apprenticeships, skills boot camps, gap years, first year jobs, traineeships, and everything else in between that we have had launched, including T-levels and more over recent years. And when I came back, I looked at the market and said, actually, that's amazing, and what we do as a job board is fantastic. It certainly works for me. But actually, the way young people and Gen Z engage has continued to evolve and change. As a byproduct of that, we looked at the market and we looked at, okay, how are young people engaging? Increase in social media and a huge increase in good quality content they were engaging with as well. So we really pivoted our offering to be not just a job board, but more of an end-to-end recruitment marketing agency, specialising in that Gen Z engagement and that next generation of employee for organisations. So we have a content creation agency in-house, we have a social agency in-house, and we still have our core job board and our core offering, which has, got us our brand name to this day and will always be a staple within schools and colleges in the UK as a port of call to put their students to alongside UCAS and other opportunities, either post-18 for sixth form and university, or post-16 for college, sixth form or apprenticeship.
Good stuff. Look, I mean, what I love about you and the organisation is you're super, super close to the audiences that a lot of organisations, spend time and effort struggling to attract and in particular retain. So, I think let's start off with, before we go into the whole thing about what Gen Z can offer health and social care, let's just tackle head on some stereotypes of what particularly older generations, tend to have, and the media tends to have about Generation Z.
Yeah.
Which one should we pick first? Go on.
Yeah, well, I think there's been this big thing around sort of laziness amongst generation, that they're not actually driven, that they're lazy, they don't actually, not they don't care, but they're not really that bothered. Whereas they were saying that millennials were way more career driven and so on and so forth. But actually, categorically, when you look at our audience, the people we engage with, both, in our ambassador community, but also in our wider actually, user database, it's a really engaged Gen Z audience who are making very active choices to go and apply for opportunities, to go and do their research, to go and engage in that content and go and really discover what's out there. And we speak to employers up and down the country who talk about how fantastic their Gen Z hires have been for adding to a different dynamic to their organisation. I think some generations are always, more reluctant to change than others, and I think on the flip side, Gen Z are actually way more open to change. and that shows also with the stereotype around career hopping. You know, Gen Z certainly feed into that massively, that actually they're not necessarily looking at careers and jobs as 10, 20-year stints. They're looking at it as
Mm.
maybe 2, 3 year stints. And that's okay, actually. That is completely okay. And I think if employers embrace that, they're going to get really engaged young people. I think those lazy young people don't exist necessarily. Actually, they are very engaged, but they don't necessarily want to just sit and tread the same water for 10 to 20 years like previous generations have done. So I think that's
Mm.
been a big one we've heard spoken about quite a lot recently. I know me and you have worked on some bits, Chris, where that thing around career hopping has come up a lot as well.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, I think it's, it's looking into that, more. The career hopping thing is really about finding different experiences and really finding what that fit is. And whereas, older generations, I can certainly put myself in this bracket in terms of this,
Yeah,
the traditional mindset that came from previous generations, which is,
yeah,
you find yourself a job, and you've got to be at somewhere for at least a year.
yeah,
Otherwise, it'll just look a bit odd on your CV. Now, you can get great experiences, over a year and more, but it's more about organizations being able to provide that variety.
mm,
So people get that variety in one organization over, say, 2 or 3 years, or they have to get it by jumping from organization to organization.
exactly. We're probably
Mm.
seeing as well, and I know brands like Ticketmaster and a lot of the sort of event-based brands have spoken about this from a sort of a user perspective, not away from careers, actually, in terms of people B2C, engaging in events and so on. That Gen Z as an audience is much more engaged with experience, like you said, over
Mm.
physical goods necessarily. So, some
Mm.
of their biggest growth customers for experiences, for ticket sales, for things like that are Gen Z because, they're favouring experiences, and that's correlating more with those career choices that they're making.
Mm.
That young people want to make experience-led decisions on their careers,
Mm.
and they want careers that fulfill that sort of inner need. We're probably going back to almost like a gap year generation, and I'm not saying that
Mm.
every Gen Zer is leaving school and saying I'm going to go and have a gap year. But the concept of a gap year around going away and getting experience, I think, is correlating more with the generations that are leaving school now and will continue to leave
Mm.
school over the next few years.
Yeah.
Over what we've sort of seen, obviously, take COVID out of the equation, but even pre-COVID, it sort of dipped quite a bit.
Mm.
But I think we're returning to that level now where young people go and experience in those choices that they're making.
Is that, got to talk about, I suppose, university and the higher profile cost of university. And
Yeah,
even
yeah.
recently, obviously, it's gone up. Some would say not by much, but maybe it's the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of, post COVID, cost of higher education rising, but also the question about quality,
Yeah.
and I'm investing this much, although I have to pay it maybe later on. Am I really getting my value for money? So how much of that do you think is impacting when you kind of think about the people that you guys are talking to and you hear from?
Yeah, I think cost is obviously a massive factor because of everything that's going on in the cost of living crisis we're in around the world. I think young people are looking at the cost of degrees and going, "Oh, how does this correlate with my potential earning capacity?" And the other costs associated with going to university. It's not necessarily just
Mm.
the tuition fees; it's actually the
Yeah.
living costs and so much more. So I think that definitely plays a massive part. I, I'd say maybe less so in some ways. Is that a factor? Because I think some young people are looking at the apprenticeship market in particular and going, "Well, hold on, I could get the degree via an apprenticeship route, or I
Mm.
can cut the same path via an apprenticeship route," and that makes them go, "Well, I might as well not bother." And look, you will still always have your audience as well who go to university regardless. Some will be for that's what they need to do for their chosen path, because there are some pathways where unlike solicitors, etc., where the pathways change quite a bit, there are some pathways that hasn't completely changed yet. But for some young people, they'll go for the sake of the wider life aspect and all the other things and getting away from home early and so on and so forth, and that's also okay.
Mm.
But I do think the increase in tuition fees and a lot of the publicity around that will certainly play an effect. But like I said, as does the growing awareness of apprenticeships, I think also play a massive effect.
Yeah, and so actually, that's very much kind of what you say touches on the conversations that we have about in the health and social care space, especially healthcare, is obviously the new Labour government coming in, first one
Yeah.
for 14 years, and they're being in this decade of national renewal. Um, so actually, it'd be interesting to see what happens when it comes to the NHS. The NHS. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when the NHS launch their plan in the springtime, which they're going through a massive kind of consultation period where they're
Yeah.
talking to people throughout the NHS and really identifying what the plan should be to I suppose in probably their eyes rebooting the NHS. So with that and this kind of period of optimism that's coming, that promise of renewal of the NHS. How does that fit in with when it comes to actually saying, well, what role do Gen Z have in I suppose contributing to that plan? What can they bring to the table when it comes to contributing to the NHS?
Yeah, I think there's a big thing around sort of workforce for the future. Obviously, there's certain career pathways in a multitude of industries and 100% in healthcare as well, where specific pathways within that healthcare sector on the whole will have an aging workforce. We know that.
Mm,
We know Brexit had a massive effect on a number of industries, including the NHS, in terms of hiring plans with people coming over from abroad. And I know there was obviously changes in certain legislation and things like this that allowed them to tweak the rules, so to speak, in many ways.
mm,
But that certainly had an effect for a number of organisations in healthcare and wider sectors. So that's where you can then look at us as a country and go, well, hold on, okay, there's this many young people qualifying sixth form, college, etc. at 18 every year, or even post GCSE at 16 every year. How can we tap into that audience to actually increase our hiring, to support with our hiring demand? And that doesn't always necessarily, we're not necessarily saying, medical school becomes null and void and things like that, because at the end of the day,
mm,
you're going to need that for professions. But
absolutely.
especially that wider infrastructure behind the healthcare sector that's massively needed, that doesn't necessarily need a medical school degree level qualification, your admin, your back office functionality, and some obviously more nurse based practical functionality as well, where you can learn on the job or in an apprenticeship
Mm,
style, should 100% be top of the agenda, because we have so many young people coming out of education every single year, a number of which will become neets. That happens every single year. So there is
mm.
a real pool of talent there available for the NHS and obviously wider healthcare organisations as well to get after.
There's definitely an alignment there of what the NHS is about, what health and social care is about,
100%.
and what this next generation workforce are actually what they want from their
Yeah.
career. Um, I found the challenges, and we're doing some work recently around the NHS and nursing, and it was you know, yes, there's that thing about connecting with purpose and wanting to help the communities that you're part of by working at an organisation like the NHS. But there is this thing about flexibility and issues with not maybe having the flexibility in a job
Yeah.
or feeling that their job is just going to be all about burnout when you only have to look at places like Australia and particularly Germany, where they offer more flexible type of working, which is going to be extremely appealing to to people who want, well, to be honest, want to save lives but also have a life themselves.
Absolutely.
It's fair enough. It's yes, it's a vocation. It can be said is a vocation, but doesn't mean that it should be to the detriment
Yeah,
of your
absolutely.
own life as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think one of the big things that the healthcare sector needs to do more actually for Gen Z is someone. I also am a school governor outside of running, not going to uni, so
Yes,
see a
of
lot
course, yeah.
of careers education. And I think one of the big things is there's definitely a lack of awareness amongst young people around healthcare professions, and
Mm,
that's no disrespect to the NHS or private healthcare companies, but I just did a careers day at one of the schools I'm a governor for, and the amount of young people that talk about like their interests, and you're like, oh my god, a career in healthcare would be amazing. They're like, but I don't want to be a doctor. I don't want to go to medical school. And you're like, no, 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 no. There are
Yeah.
other pathways within, within the organisation. It's the same issues the military have. People
Mm.
think that the RAF are all pilots, but there's engineers, there's HR
Yeah, yeah,
professionals,
it's
chef.
true.
So the issues are very much the same. So I think there's definitely an opportunity there for the healthcare sector to get better at actually that careers education piece and looking at pathways um, that are available and
Yeah, it's true.
allowing young people to understand what those pathways are.
And it is so, just take the NHS. NHS in itself is such a high profile, jewel in the crown of the welfare state in this country, often a key issue when it comes to elections, and understandably so. But actually, it's got the great benefit that lots of organisations don't have, which is fantastic brand awareness.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
To
yeah.
kind of look at
Every
a
young
branding and
person knows
marketing
who they are.
perspective,
Yeah,
you
every
know
young
who they
person
are. They're
knows.
literally, you ask 100 people the impact that have they come across, you
Yeah,
know, those services, and all of them, of course, are going to say yes because I was born.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's
Exactly.
at least
Yeah,
that's the starting point.
yeah,
So
exactly.
I think you're right. Actually, I think there is such a good opportunity to actually turn that into really educating people more about really what the professions are in
Yeah,
an organisation like the NHS. And the good thing is, and of course, understanding that times are busy and there's lots of things to focus on, like waiting lists, for example. But instead of just relying on looking overseas, which is often seen as being regarded for decades as, and it is a short-term fix, albeit a fix anyway, is look at the long term and literally open some of the doors to your buildings and let
mm,
people in. And no doubt, I've seen it. We've both seen it, haven't we? When you get people who are very passionate about what they do, like nurses, they do a great job in
yeah. They do
showing
the
what it's
selling
really
for
like.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah, they do the
yeah.
selling for you.
And what do you think about this thing about look at young when you're looking at younger generations coming into the world of work, you know, there is often this thing about, oh well, one, they don't have the experience, or I don't have the experience because I haven't got work experience, but they have a lot to bring, don't they, in terms of like things like thinking differently,
Yeah, absolutely.
bringing
And
different perspectives.
they're gonna bring different perspectives to any organization. Some of them, they're digital natives. They're tech natives. They've grown up with tech as a massive sort of infrastructure element of their childhoods and
Mm,
probably for a lot of them their school lives as well. So digitally they'll be a very different type of savvy
mm,
to maybe your typical hire that maybe would
mm,
have previously taken up an admin position, for example. Not saying that's always the case, but in some cases,
yeah,
um, we know it's a generation that are very passionate about some really big issues in the world as well. Very big on diversity and inclusion and things like this. So they're going to bring that to an organisation, especially if you isolate the NHS, where diversity, inclusion, things like that is such an important pillar of what they do,
mm, mm,
and being equal and being open to all and so on and so forth. So I think in their nature, there's a really good diverse talent pool there who are really understanding, really open to change, really open to new things, really supportive of anyone regardless of background. And like I said, from
mm,
a skill set perspective, they're going to come in with a very different skill set to maybe someone 20 years ago.
yeah,
When we're I'm sure the infrastructure and IT tech infrastructure within an organisation like the NHS is vast.
mm.
Um, but a lot of these young people will be coming into it with the understanding that actually they've, oh, this is normal to me. This is
Yeah,
very,
they have expectations that need to be
yeah,
met, don't they? Otherwise, those people they'll move on. They won't. Yeah,
100%.
yeah. And actually, there's also that thing about what the technology gives you as well is that access to information
Yeah,
and knowledge literally at your fingertips.
yeah,
Oh God, even
absolutely,
now with that quick question to ChatGPT.
absolutely,
It's
yeah,
that in itself changes mindset as well. The technology is an enabler for, I suppose, democratizing information, which then itself encourages people to look at things from different perspectives more. I've even spoken to healthcare professionals, particular group of professions where they're saying that they they lean on the younger generation coming into their profession to understand how to use social media.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
balancing that obviously with authenticity and making sure things are correct, but it's there is that reverse mentoring element to things as well, which is really important. Well, thanks very much. Really appreciate it.
Always
As
a
it's a
pleasure.
conversation go on for much longer, of course, it always does with us. But it's it's a great Kickstarter for sure. And the more organisations can encourage people into health and social care sectors, and the better, definitely.
Definitely.